Goalies scoring goals, players decimating other teams, and team managers making grave mistakes. These are the greatest moments in NHL history, Part 2. Number 11, Andy Brown, the last goalie to play without a mask. While Jacques Plante is known as the first goalie to play without a mask in an NHL game, few recall the final goalie to do so. Andy Brown of the Pittsburgh Penguins played without a mask in a 6-3 loss to the Atlanta Flames on April 7, 1974. Ironically, Brown donned a mask during practice because he didn't want to incur unnecessary risks, but refused to wear one during games. Brown resumed his pro hockey career with the WHA's Indianapolis Racers, playing without a mask until the 1976-77 season, but no goalkeeper has ever participated in an NHL game since then without something to protect their face. In fact, if a goalie's mask falls off, the whistle is instantly blown and play is halted. Brown acquired the nickname Fearless for playing without a mask. Number 10. Gordie Howe returns to Detroit for the All-Star Game in 1980. Gordie Howe played hockey in Detroit for 25 years. He was widely regarded as the best hockey player of all time, and he helped the Red Wings win 4 Stanley Cups. Howe retired as the NHL's all-time top scorer after the 1970-71 season. He signed with the WHA's Houston Aeros 2 years later to play with his kids, Mark and Marty. Howe returned to the NHL after 7 seasons in the WHA after the NHL acquired 4 WHA franchises in 1979. Howe represented the Hartford Whalers in the 1980 All-Star Game, which was to be held at Detroit's new Joe Louis Arena. When Howe's name was called during pre-game introductions, Detroit hockey fans gave him a standing ovation. Mr. Hockey had returned home, and fans had one more chance to honor the man who had provided them with so much excellent hockey for so many years. Number 9. Vladimir Konstantinov holds the cup. Defenseman Vladimir Konstantinov was a hard-hitting defenseman with the Detroit Red Wings who helped them win the Stanley Cup in 1997. Konstantinov had a fantastic season in 1996-97. In the voting for the Norris Trophy as the league's best defenseman, he finished second to Brian Leetch. Konstantinov was injured in a limousine accident shortly after winning the Stanley Cup. He was in a coma for several weeks and eventually became partially paralyzed and confined to a wheelchair. When the Wings won the Stanley Cup again in 1998, Konstantinov was brought onto the ice and handed the trophy by his teammates. The sight of Konstantinov beaming and hoisting the cup while in his wheelchair on the ice was one of the most touching moments in NHL history. Number 8. Billy Smith becomes the first goalie in NHL history to score a goal. Many goalies had attempted to score a goal, but it happened almost by chance on November 28, 1979, when Colorado's Rob Ramage mistakenly cleared the puck into his own empty net after the Rockies had removed their goalkeeper during a delayed penalty against New York. Billy Smith of the Islanders was credited with a goal. Smith was the final Islander to touch the ball and was credited with the goal. While Ron Hextall of Philadelphia was the first goalkeeper to purposely shoot a puck into a goal, it was Hall of Famer Billy Smith that ultimately got netminders off the snide back in 1979. Number 7. Super Mario freezes the North Stars. At the Igloo in Pittsburgh, Mario Lemieux scored a stunning goal against the Minnesota North Stars in Game 2 of the 1990-91 Stanley Cup Final. The Penguins were already down 1-0 in the series and couldn't afford to go back to Minnesota down 2-0. Lemieux took up the puck in his own zone and quickly skated down the center of the ice. He had no teammates with him as he dashed towards the North Stars zone. After that, the Pittsburgh captain tricked out both Minnesota defensemen, skated in between them, and then deceived out goalkeeper John Casey before beating him with a backhander. Pittsburgh went on to win the game 4-1 and the series 4-2 in the end. It was the Pittsburgh Penguins' first Stanley Cup victory, and their captain's spectacular goal set the tone. Number 6. Defenseman Ray Bork finally wins the cup. Ray Bork played 20 Hall of Fame seasons for the Boston Bruins, yet he never won a Stanley Cup. In 2000, he was moved to the Colorado Avalanche in an attempt to give Bork one more championship before retiring. The whole city of Boston, as well as many hockey fans across North America, were rooting for Bork and the Avs to win the Stanley Cup in a hard-fought 7-game series against the New Jersey Devils. After more than 20 years of NHL toil, the image of Bork finally holding the Stanley Cup over his head was a remarkable and touching moment in NHL history. It was also Bork's final NHL appearance. Number 5. Lester Patrick dons the pads. The New York Rangers were losing Game 2 of their Stanley Cup Final Series against the Montreal Maroons in 1928. The Rangers were down 1-0 in the series, and their goalkeeper Lorne Chabot was injured and unable to play. Back then, teams didn't carry backup goalies, and the Maroons declined the Rangers' request to utilize Ottawa Senators goalie Alex Connell, who was in attendance. The Rangers were compelled to find a replacement goalie quickly, so they turned to coach Lester Patrick, who had long ago retired as a player and was not a goalie. Patrick was the oldest player in a Stanley Cup final at 44 years, 3 months and 9 days old. The Rangers checked hard and defended well, and Patrick only allowed 1 goal the rest of the way. The Rangers prevailed 2-1 in overtime to claim their first Stanley Cup victory in 5 years. Just like Patrick helped the Rangers, you can help our channel by subscribing and leaving a like on the video. Number 4. Gretzky's final farewell. When Gretzky played his final NHL game on April 18, 1999 at New York's Madison Square Garden, as fans got one last chance to watch the Great One in action, the game became a celebration of all things Gretzky, who did not disappoint, assisting on the Rangers' lone goal in a 2-1 overtime loss to the Pittsburgh Penguins. On Gretzky's final assist, defenseman Brian Leetch had the privilege of scoring the goal. Before the game, the words of the Canadian and American national anthems were rewritten to include Gretzky's name, as teammates and opponents alike crowded around hockey's all-time top scorer to shake his hand and say goodbye. Gretzky's NHL career ended with 894 goals of 2,857 points in 1,487 games. Number 3. The NHL introduces the shootout. Following the owners' lockout and cancellation of the whole 2004-2005 season, the NHL believed it needed to make adjustments to the game to better the experience for both players and fans. The shootout was one of the new innovations. If a game was still tied after 5 minutes of overtime, each team would get 3 chances to score on penalty shots against the other goalie, with the team that scored the most goals receiving 2 points. 1 point was awarded to the club that lost the shootout. NHL games could no longer end in ties as a consequence of the shootout. The shootout is not used in the Stanley Cup playoffs, where overtime is still used to determine the winner. Despite accusations that the shootout is a gimmick, it has been well received by most spectators and has given excitement to the game. Number 2. Rookie Ken Dryden leads the Habs to the 1971 Stanley Cup victory. When the 1970-71 NHL playoffs began, Ken Dryden had only appeared in 6 NHL games, but the Cornell grad had performed admirably and was selected Montreal's starting goaltender over veteran Rogie Vachon. Dryden did nothing more than lead the Canadiens to one of the greatest upsets in NHL history. First, in 7 games, Montreal defeated the defending Stanley Cup champion Bruins. The Bruins set records that year, scoring more than 100 goals than the next best club and ending 12 games ahead of them in the standings. They also boasted the NHL's top 4 scorers in Bobby Orr, Phil Esposito, Johnny Busick, and Ken Hodge. Dryden then guided the Habs to a Stanley Cup victory over the Chicago Blackhawks. The following season, he won the Calder Trophy as the league's top rookie after winning the Conn Smythe Trophy as playoff MVP. Dryden went on to have a Hall of Fame career, leading the Canadiens to Stanley Cups in 1973, 1976, 1977, 1978, and 1979 before retiring from hockey. Number 1. Gretzky traded to the Kings. On August 9, 1988, the Edmonton Oilers did the unthinkable. They traded Wayne Gretzky, probably the greatest hockey player of all times, just months after he helped lead the team to its 4th Stanley Cup victory in 5 years. Oilers owner Pete Pocklington reportedly sought to acquire funds because several of his non-hockey business ventures were struggling. As a result, he began scouting Gretzky across the league. In return for Martin Gelinas, Jimmy Carson, 3 first-round draft picks, and $15 million in cash, the Great One was traded to Los Angeles along with Marty McSorley and Mike Krushelnyski. Pocklington was burned in effigy outside the Northlands Coliseum by irate fans in Edmonton who were outraged by the deal. The majority of Canadians were surprised that Gretzky could be transferred. Meanwhile, Gretzky's trade to Los Angeles aided in the development of hockey in Southern California as well as in non-traditional areas across the United States. Gretzky played nearly 8 seasons for the Kings, helping them reach the Stanley Cup final for the first time in franchise history in 1993. Now, to more NHL content, click the video on the screen to know about the most annoying fan base in NHL. Hint, it's not the Kings.